Hey now, and how are you doing? Want to welcome you to the next episode of Peace, Love, and Bring a Bat. Today, we're going to talk about leadership. We're going to talk about so many different things. We're going to talk about actually extraordinary leadership because my friend Robert is really coming in with a lot of information, lots of experiences, and that's what we're going to do is taking some of his timeless wisdom and turning it into some real facts for us to move forward. How are you doing today, Robert?
I'm well, thank you. It's early summer here in the Rocky Mountains, and so I'm you get to enjoy being outdoors. I like that a lot.
Yeah, and it's a beautiful time to be out there. I've been out there during this time of year. Uh, great, no humidity, and it's all great. And you don't have to worry about snowstorms, the big snowstorms.
We have them at odd times and in odd amounts, but the when I left Japan after 12 years residency there, and working all over Asia, I only had two rules. One was a good airport, and second one was a low humidity.
Yep.
Uh, so that's how I ended up in Colorado as
Okay,
that choice.
Colorado's a wonderful place.
So, but I'm delighted to be with you and talk about one of my favorite subjects, which is leadership with your family, with your company, with your community, with a nation. And it's a subject dear to my heart. It's one I've both lived and studied and taught.
Well, that's awesome. So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, and then we'll dive into the episode.
Wonderful. Look, I'm old enough to have that story take 3 days to tell. But I think some significant pieces are that I grew up in abject poverty and abuse. And people can go in several directions from that. A common one, frankly, is to hide or get into some addiction or some mental state of I'm going to stay in my mother's basement. Another choice is to get angry, and that was me. And I made a choice, and I said to myself, today we teach a lot about getting clear about your personal and organizational purpose, your reason for existing. And in my case, that purpose, and for many years, was I'll never be poor again,
Mm.
because I equated money to power and power to being safe, that I wouldn't get hit anymore. So that's the beginning. At 17, I had a top 40 radio show, made more money than my father ever made, was named most likely to succeed by my graduating class of 300 students in high school, was the commencement speaker, all of those good things. And have found something that I truly loved, which is radio. And so that was a turning point for me in terms of confidence and capability. And, one of my friends says, you found your voice. And to
Mm.
some degree, that was true. Uh, that lasted 8 years in radio, and I went on with my life. Another turning point was at 27, I had made liars out of my 299 peers graduating from high school. The most likely to succeed kid was broke, had been married and divorced, felt horribly guilty about it, and had a health problem where I had been told by multiple experts in the medical field that I wouldn't live past 35. So my life was a mess.
Wow.
And a friend of mine went out to California. We were living in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And he went out to California to take one of the early human potential movement trainings called Mind Dynamics, a 4-day program. And he came back and raved about the experience and said, Robert, you have to go. And I said, tell me more about it. And the more he told me, the more resistance I had. None of that fruits and nuts California stuff for this guy, and the more he explained about it, the more I realized he couldn't explain it. But over the next 6 months, where he continually talked about it, said, I have to go, I watched him fix a struggling marriage. And given my history, that caught my eye. I watched his business grow at double figures, 20, 25% a year if annualized. And he cleared up a health problem that he had. I couldn't argue with the results. So, with my arms crossed, legs crossed, probably eyes crossed, I went to the Mind Dynamics seminar. Oh, and they brought it to Milwaukee. His promotion of it brought it to Milwaukee.
The universal
And
lines. We talked a little bit about that when you start looking at the patterns in our lives, how things align, right? It
yes,
could be coincidence, right? I know the objector will say it's coincidence, and you just want to push things together, but I have a different belief of that.
he and another one of our friends who also did go to California and take the training, working on me for that 6 months, is a gift that I will never repay. I'll never be able to. It's been such a gift in my life. So following that training, my income tripled. The year after that, it went up 10 times. I started making more money per month than I'd ever made in a year. My relationships cleared up, and just amazing thing. Oh, and instead of daily chest pain, it went away. Went away. It came years later. It came back for a couple of weeks, but uh, just miracles happened out of that experience. Not instant. It took some time for me to internalize and then behavior in those new ways to create those results. And so I sold that little sales business. I moved to New York City. I went from a team of 31 people in my little company in Milwaukee to 850 people. And I had I had a lot of success by interviewing people every week, sitting down. What was your
Mhm.
target? What did you do? What did you learn? What's next for you? That kind of very intimate way of managing. And with 850 people, you can't do that. So I started doing weekend seminars, and I started bringing a mind dynamics instructor based in New York into my weekend seminars and do 90 minutes with people. And I enrolled over 400 people into mind dynamics. Not for, I didn't get paid for it. I didn't understand the training. I didn't know who was behind it. I just knew that it worked. And also, I was being paid on a percentage of the increase. So
Mm.
when people went to that seminar and came out and had these amazing results, I was getting paid for it indirectly. And one day, the founder and chairman of that company, Alexander Everett, called me. He had to introduce himself because I didn't know his name. And he called to say thank you for the support of the program in New York. And he invited me to California. He sent me a first class ticket, my first ever first class ride. And I went out to California, and 10 days later, I was president of Mind Dynamics. So that was another turning point for me. Uh,
Mm.
so, so I ran the business of that training company. He handled the training itself, the training of trainers, the culture, all of the soft side of it. I worked with the team to build the company. And the first 2 years, kind of straightening out the U.S. business, and we were incredibly successful. And the last 2 years, running around the world, setting up foreign subsidiaries, primarily in Europe. So I was commuting to Europe for 2 years.
Wow.
Interesting. You can do that when you're young, I learned, David. And uh, I said no to one country, and that was Japan. And, people
Mm.
with even a slight knowledge of culture know that the Japanese do not give up with one failure. And they wouldn't allow me to say no.
Mm.
But I did for a variety of reasons. And but about once a month they would be in touch. At that time, primarily, frankly, through fax and written letters and phone calls. A little different every month. Come to Japan. We need this program. We had graduates, American graduates, doing business in Japan, running companies, primarily American companies, who wanted us to come. And I said, no, 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 for a variety of reasons. The ownership of Mind Dynamics changed. I didn't like it, didn't work for me. Uh, I was no longer working for an enlightened visionary. I was working for a probate judge, frankly.
Mm.
The co-owner died in a plane crash and without a will, and with
Wow.
32 companies, including ours, that he owned 50% of. So Alexander sold his shares to the court. A transaction I had never heard of and haven't heard of since. But they gained access to our cash, and we had a lot of it, and they needed it for taxes. So I quit. I started a company called LifeSpring and changed the training and brought a few people from Mind Dynamics, people that had been part of my team there, and a couple of kind of newer people, but from our industry. And we took off and started doing business. We got into three cities pretty quickly and with training centers and started having a little bit of success. LifeSpring went on to be in 17 U.S. cities, graduate over 500,000 graduates, but I quit uh, for the second time in 6 months. I quit. It didn't work for me. I made a bunch of mistakes that are the heart of the leadership work that I do today. What I
Mm.
learned from that failure, that personal failure, is put me on a path of learning about this thing called culture. Peter Drucker the late Peter Drucker was credited with saying something that a lot of other people are credited with, which he said that culture eats strategy for breakfast.
100%.
And that's what I learned
Right, your,
from
your
that.
your people will be your people. If they're gonna run through fire for you, there's a lot more than you can make up for. Well, I'll let you talk about it.
Well,
You're
well,
you're the expert, not me.
well, I learned that it's foundational, that you still have to do a lot. You still have to have good managers, but
Mhm.
it's absolutely foundational for leaders is the culture. And it covers up a lot of sins and mistakes, and I'm an example of that. And but a few days after I uh, sold my shares to the other partners in LifeSpring, and frankly, I sold them for nothing down and forever to pay.
Mm.
And the old joke is true. It took them longer than forever to pay. But they eventually did pay me, by the way. I was the sole funder of the company. So, and so I'm broke. I've got a new family. I've got a mortgage. I've got all the obligations. I've spent all my money on LifeSpring. And I get a fax from Japan saying, new offer. Come for just 90 days. We'll pay you for 1 year. Come for 90 days, set up a program. You can leave. We'll pay you for 1 year. And, years later, people say, oh, you must have had a vision bringing experiential learning to Japan and throughout Asia. No, I came because I was broke and I had a family. And originally, I think there might have been some behind the scenes power, whether you credit God or the lines on your hand or the stars, credit what you will.
Right.
I think there was something going on that brought me to Japan. And my 90 days turned into 12 years the first time. I've now lived abroad for 23 years of my working life in Japan, in Hong Kong, and mainland China, and traveled. When I wasn't living there, I was flying the Pacific. I took a lot. I have a
Yep.
lot of miles, as they say, and so that was the I guess the big significant move was to go to Japan to take that risk, set up a program, and then fall in love with what I was doing. And having learned a lot of lessons from what happened with LifeSpring, I started applying them, one at a time, 10 at a time, 50 at a time. We eventually had 240 full-time people, 60 contract people, so about 300 who worked almost full-time for us, trainers who wanted to be independent, but did a lot of work for us. And so 300 people, 17 locations throughout Asia, uh, a very successful business. So that's kind of my history and on the positive side of things.
Okay, but you were talking about culture. So, tell why is culture so important? Because everybody talks about culture. I know I was in corporate America for 30 years, right? Everybody talks about culture, but for some reason we always pivoted every 3 to 5 years, you know, with a new catchphrase. It really wasn't changing the culture, but it was, you know, let's own it. Let's do this, let's do that. But it really wasn't the right culture.
Well, there are a lot of one-liners that have been around forever, and they are one-liners because they're true. And an example is that people don't remember what you said or even what you did, but they remember how you made them feel.
Hmm.
And good salespeople know that sales take place emotionally, not logically. Uh, I mean, people bring forth a lot of logic after they've made their emotional decision. You know, if you look at an automobile commercial on television, you know, they don't tell you how many cubic inches are in the engine. They don't tell you about the safety features that are now built into every car. What did they do? They show a family with a big smile and the kids jumping in the back seat, and they show the husband and wife looking at each other on a day trip, you know, that they're really enjoying and getting out and going into a party or a restaurant. You know, it's all emotional. Now, when you go to a good salesperson, they're sorting for how can I make this person feel better? Because it's in that feeling realm, which is a cultural thing, that they make their decision and then they have to back it up with some logic and some proof. So, but culture is based on these very soft human qualities, and we identify them as a way to build a strong culture is to be clear about, first of all, why are you here as a human being
Hmm.
and as a company? What is unique about you or that company? That's your purpose. You know, I had this purpose that drove me to incredible wealth, to semi-retirement 46, to a 14,500 square foot home on 76 acres just
Hmm.
outside of Aspen, Colorado. You know, with my own jet and a collection of automobiles and trucks and personal staff and all that stuff. Uh, yeah, you know, and all of that, being able to create those results is important, but that was created out of a negative purpose, which is I'll never be poor again. And during that period of time, and talking about my personal cultural movement, David, I started waking up in this beautiful home uh, there and living with all the rich people in Aspen. I started waking up daily thinking, God is not done with me.
Hmm.
There is something that I haven't done, and it's my job to discover it. And you know, I went through, you know, those happy days were interrupted for with 3 years of what one of my friends called the divorce from hell.
Hmm.
My former wife left me for a lawyer, and my friend John Denver and I, our wives were best friends. They still are, and they coordinated it within 2 weeks. They both dumped John and me.
Wow.
So we went through this process together. And one of the events that was meaningful to me was a day at the Vapor Caves. Down valley from Aspen is a little town called Glenwood Springs, and it's based around a hot springs and a pool. And but next to the pool are the Vapor Caves, where you know they've done some work inside this cave, so there's places to sit. So you go in and you cook in that natural steam that's coming up out of the earth, out of the rocks. And then you go and take a shower and get a massage, and then you go back and cook for a while, and then you have a macrobiotic lunch. So John and I did that a lot of times and talked. That's where we talked a lot. And one of the things we decided was that anything that bad that could happen in life must have a lesson in it, and that it all begins with us.
Yep.
So we did a lot of work on ourselves. And one of the things that I learned is that uh, you know, I needed to listen to my heart, and so do the people around me. I needed to, and you know, today what I sort for when I'm working with an executive team is what's their focus, what's their alignment, and then what's their commitment.
Hmm.
Uh, that those three things will drive results if they get set up right. And so it starts with your purpose, because that's what you get aligned to, your vision, you know, that picture that maybe will never be accomplished in your lifetime, but it's inspiring.
Hmm.
And then your uh, values. What would you die for? What would where do you plant your flag
Yep.
with people, particularly with people, and in the world, in your family, and and then you know in later years I've added strategic intent not, I mean, we've taught the power of intention for many, many years, and I know of it in my personal life. I know it in my with my friends, and I know it with our clients. And and I also know that strategy is actually important. That if you align your intention with your strategy and you're clear about your purpose, vision, and values, you have a foundation to build on. It still takes a lot of work. Look, my clients work incredibly hard. They're incredibly smart. They have some skills that I don't have. But if they're a little unclear on purpose, vision, values, or strategic intent, or their team is, then we've got something to work with and something that can produce extraordinary results.
Yeah, no, that's exactly it. Is when you combine it and you know what your strategy. I mean, because no matter what culture, you can have a good old culture, right? Google didn't become Google just because it has these relax rooms and things like that. They had a strategy. You have to see the future, right? You have to see what you want to do. And I was once told great leaders plan in 6 months increments, as well as, daily to make sure that you're going along. You don't just cross your fingers and say, I'll see you in 6 months. So there has to be that strategy to make sure you stay on your path. What would be something that you'd be able to tell people who need to stay on their path, right? We get distracted by so many things, how AI is going to do this, or even just the culture, right? When you're walking into a position, it, just understanding the culture you have versus the culture to be more ready for growth.
Well, it's a great question. And speaking of a 3 day seminar, that's it. And we only have a few minutes. A lot of the work I do is based on stories, things that actually have happened in my life. And today, my focus is on the small and medium-sized growth company. They're either in a little bit of trouble and they need some help in that regard, maybe with declining margins or key people leaving, or the owner ending up way more committed than anybody else in the company, which is kind of to be expected, but sometimes it gets pretty extreme. So things like that, where they're a bit of trouble. And my other kind of group of clients are people that have a big dream and they're honest enough and aware enough to know that the way they are operating, either personally or that their team is operating, is inadequate to the opportunity.
Mm.
And I come in that setting. However, we did do, when I came back to the US, I set up a company that did culture change in large organizations. And the example, when this is, I'm not telling some story out of school. This story was in the ABA magazine, American Bankers Association magazine, their monthly magazine, about how ARC International, my company, had turned around this centuries old institution called Chase Bank,
Mm.
Chase Manhattan Bank at that
Right.
time.
Yep. I remember them well. I still have my first bank account with them.
So, an example that goes to answer your question is we brought the 32 top people in Chase into a room. And these were the heads of their business in Brazil, their business in Korea, their business in China, their business in France and England, all of these. And in what we learned about the Chase system is those people running those countries were like the princes of the realm. I mean, they ran everything. They didn't coordinate with the country next door to them
Right.
or even talk to them. We learned that those 32 people, all of them making millions of dollars a year, all of them with their little kingdoms or big kingdoms, had never been in a room together at the same time.
Wow.
32 people running that massive institution that, by the way, was headed for bankruptcy when we first started working with them. And again, that's in the ABA magazine story. It's not a secret. They had never been in a room together to work out their purpose, vision, and values. They were operating the way they operated traditionally in their country. So, my answer to your question is the most powerful thing that we know about human beings, I believe, is our creativity. But second to that, and a close second, is we are social beings, that we do things better in groups, in tribes. I mean, there's
Yep.
tons of research on this. going back thousands of years. So we put those 32 people in a room, and that's what I do today. I recommend strongly that any owner, any CEO that wants to, in an extraordinary way, multiply their effectiveness, put your team in the room with somebody that knows what they're doing. I mean, I'm not the only one, but I'm a pretty good one. The team I've put together are some of them are better than me. And put them in that room and in a carefully designed series of experiential exercises, have them get to know each other at a level they haven't even been able to imagine, and to get to know their strengths and weaknesses, their requests. My coach, one of my coaches, uses the term yearning. What's
Mm.
their yearning? What is it that they so deeply feel and quite often don't share with anyone else?
100%. That, especially in corporate America today, the sharing of an idea that's outside to get to know who you are. That's among the work that I do when I go to the teams. I have my peace, love, and bring a bat. We talk about structure, but it's like the board breaking, and hitting that sweet spot. You've probably played baseball at some point in your life, and when you hit the sweet spot, when you hit it right on, that feeling, and that's what you want to translate into the work that you do, the vision that you have. And that's really what I always strive, and wanting to meet people like yourself, because it's that vision of moving people towards their goals, what they're yearning for. It's not only the business goal, right? Nobody wants to be a failure. Nobody intends on that, or very few people would do that. But how do we get those vision? And I guess that's my question to you. How do you get people to, move towards their vision with their goals, not just like, all right, I'll do it if I have to. It's to bring out that yearning that you mentioned.
Look, helping people get real, get authentic is, in our experience, the answer to that question. But the techniques are somewhat proprietary,
Yep.
and we, with 1,400,000 graduates worldwide,
Right.
we know something about that subject. We know how to create that kind of radical shift, that transformational moment for people. And we have people that went through one of our programs 20 years ago who still correspond to me in December of each year about their yearly goals. Uh, that experience was so memorable to them. I've now had two songs written about me from those kinds of incredibly successful people who, you know, became knowledgeable about AI and hired a bunch of people and created these songs that embarrass me, frankly, but they're very sweet and heart-centered. Look, with 14,000 graduates at Chase, 18,000 graduates at Duke Energy, uh, we know a lot about people at every level of organizations,
Mm.
and we've been in the room with them. We did all of that with no salespeople and no marketing. And people say, well, no, that's impossible. No,
Not
our
possible.
phone rang because people had such an incredible experience. They talked to their buddy on the golf course or at the association meeting or in their family, and then our phone rings. So, that's we've learned how to access people at a very deep level, to fall in love with each other, to uh, be just a lot more honest. Uh, One of the things I'm going to offer your listeners, David, is that we years ago started to notice that we had a money back guarantee, and we tracked that for 17 years. Those numbers, uh, we averaged 1.7% refund rate.
Wow, that's crazy.
Okay. So, of course, 97.3 is a pretty good score, you know.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's almost perfect, right? No, nobody's perfect, but that's really close to
That's
being perfect. Yeah.
that's pretty good. And people change their marriages. They change. shifted their performance at work. They shifted their community involvement. Their life showed up, and life began to clear up just in the process of living their life because they had some markers. They had foundational structures that worked better for them. And I'm proud of that. The interesting thing was, okay, a lot of people got value, a very high percentage, but some people got a level of value that made no sense at all to me. And so early in our starting to be successful, we surveyed over 1,000 people that were incredibly successful following our seminar. And what we learned is that they came into our training with a set of principles that they were
Mm.
living every day, and then they lived those principles in our training. And so we identified 8 principles, and I wrote an essay around that. I've rewritten it a lot of times. So I've got a copy of that. It's 28-page PDF. It's shareable. It's out there to be shared. It's become the basis. I learn about these things of brown bag lunches,
Yep.
of book clubs, of uh, uh, golfing foursomes. I mean, it's amazing how people have used it. But it's about our 8 principles and how they got created. And also, there's a little self-rating tool in it. So you can look at not the 8, but look at the ones where you're doing great, and also look at the ones where if they were improved, your life would measurably change. And just focus on 1 or 2 or 3 of those at first. And so people have found it incredibly valuable. Along with that, they do get enrolled in my weekly e-zine, An Extraordinary Minute. It's now in its 18th year, once a week. And it's an idea or two from me, but it's all designed to be read in 1 minute or less.
Mm.
So
Sure.
both of those things are free. You can find them at extraordinarypeople.com. But my point of bringing that up now is that if you look at those 8 principles, you know every one of them already. You're not going to be surprised by any of them. And uh, and one of them is to be honest. And frankly, particularly in larger organizations, the level of dishonesty is so high as to be embarrassing. And people,
And that's what I'm amazed of. Like there's so many people in the spaces that I work in, and I'm like, really? I remember back, to just use that as an example on Clubhouse during the pandemic when Clubhouse, and I went on and they were like, everybody's a millionaire on there. And I'm like, and they asked me, so when did you make your first million? I go, at that time, I didn't. So I was like, they're like, what do you mean? You don't belong here then. I'm like, all right, then I'll leave. I'm like, believe me, when I earn exactly what I need to earn, and I've earned I mean, I've earned more than that in my lifetime, but I'm like, I'll celebrate it the way I'm supposed to celebrate. I'm not going to try to be something that I'm not. And that's that bat moment is that being authentic today. I'm going to tell you exactly who I am, warts and all, but I could also tell you all the value that I've brought to companies that I've worked with, as well as, situations that I've led.
look, I did a follow-up call with Chase 1 month after that famous 32-person leadership meeting and with the CEO. And he had, of course, been one of the 32 people. And he said in the conversation, I'm asking questions about what's next for them. Are they acting on the decisions they made there in the famous walk in the woods
Yep.
that they took? And then he asked me, what did I see? And I found myself, kind of trapped by our own values about being honest, was particularly with a client that
Mm,
we cared about. And I said, there's one of your 32 people, 32 top people in the company needs to be fired.
mm,
And he said, uh, who is it and why? I said, well, first of all, I'm going to give you the name that we gave him in our trainer meetings on breaks,
mm.
which he was the senior vice president of rare events. And it was true. His only job was that tennis tournament that Chase still sponsors in New York.
Wow.
You know, he was the guy that was responsible for who got the front row seats, who got the medium level seats, who got the top level seats, who got invited to the big party, who got invited to the secondary party, who the CEO needed to meet, who the vice president of marketing needed to meet, that kind of
Yeah.
thing. To do that, he was being paid, and then, bearing in mind this is over 20 years ago, he was being paid $750,000 a year plus a
All the other
gold
perks.
label
Right.
insurance program, a car, a driver, two secretaries. He had a full-time employee to do
Oh,
overheads. You remember
well,
those old
yep. Yeah,
transparencies?
I do. I had to prepare a lot of those for some of the executives when I first started.
Well, I'm sorry I brought up a
Yeah,
painful subject
not
for you.
not it's okay. I remember that one of the first partners I worked for, I worked in legal, and she was like, you have to make sure that when I point, you'll know exactly what I wanted. And heaven forbid, and I remember being with somebody who, during one of the prep sessions, had it wrong, right? Who reversed it, and he got yelled at. So I was like, that's all I needed to know. I made sure that I had my little markers, which way's facing up, which way's facing down, and nobody knew my system. And they were like, how do you never get it wrong? I'm like, preparation, buddy.
Yes. Well, that CEO of Chase at that time, he didn't realize that everybody in that room and maybe 1,000 other people in Chase knew that guy was overpaid, underutilized, uh, and they blamed the CEO for not firing him.
Mm,
Now, at Chase at that time, it was very difficult to get fired. I mean, you really had to be bad,
yep.
but that willingness to tell the truth often requires an outsider. And, the people that are my clients, they know more about their business than I will ever know. I lived in China for 6 years, and people say, "Oh, you must know a lot about Chinese culture." I don't know anything about Chinese culture.
Mm,
That's an exaggeration. But in my lifetime, I won't know what the average Chinese person did. Look, in December of 2019, my Chinese friends told me, and they didn't put it on WeChat, they didn't put it on WhatsApp, they didn't put it on Messenger. They wouldn't put it in print ever because they know the Chinese government reads everything.
hmm
First, the computer reads it, and then there's 400 people sitting in a room in Beijing right
Yep.
now that take the product off of the computer when it flags something, and then they investigate that person. Anyway, I had friends, several Chinese friends. I said, "What's going on?" And they all said the same thing. Oh, our government did this.
Mm,
They knew about Wuhan in December of 19.
yep.
They knew, but they don't tell the truth. The lowest trust environment that I know of in the world is China. They don't trust their parents. They don't trust their brother or sister. They don't trust their wife or their husband. Nobody trusts anybody. And that's the culture. And so they knew it was the government almost instantly. And the government at that time was talking about the fresh meat market in Wuhan. They're all my Chinese friends are laughing out loud
Right.
with me, but they wouldn't put it in print, right? Well, companies get to be like that,
100%.
and
They know what it was. So the question I want to ask you is not only was this guy fired, not if he was fired, I don't that, but why did you identify it? Because the job obviously was. I mean, some of that had to get done, right? If Chase is gonna invest in their marketing, there's someone that's still gonna have to do some of that job. But what was the thing that you noticed? Was it the job that somebody else couldn't take on those responsibilities, or was it something that you saw in that individual?
look, if you, like in my case,
Mhm.
in the early days, I led every training,
Mhm.
very early days, but very quickly I realized I can't build a company if I'm the product.
Right.
So I started hiring and training trainers, and so, but over the years, I did a lot of work from the back of the room, where I noticed things
Yep.
primarily with the trainer, and then on the break, you do a little coaching, and then you go back to the training. So I did that a lot. And it occurs to me that this gives me an excuse because I needed a flat surface. So I grabbed my book. So this gives me an excuse to sell my book,
Okay.
Living an Extraordinary Life. But the point I want to make is if you're sitting in the back of a room and you're watching a training and somebody is speaking and several participants start doing this, tapping with their
Tapping,
finger,
tapping. Yep.
guess what that's a sign of?
That
You
they're not
know, it
disinterested.
starts with a B and then it has an S and it's
Yep.
animal feces.
Yep.
You know, they know. And what they do with that is they talk around the coffee machine or at the bar on Friday night or wherever that
Hmm.
they let down their hair a little bit. But the next thing they do about getting agreement from the tribe that that person
Mm.
is
Yep.
inadequate, inconsequential, full of that stuff that exits from a bull, uh, is they blame the CEO. The
Right.
CEO has to know this, and they haven't fired him, or they haven't coached him, or they haven't done something.
Right. Well, yeah.
You know,
Once you see where the weak link is in a company, everybody starts seeing it. It might not be the first time, but you start seeing the weak link, and that's where okay. So he was a weak link. Whatever you noticed, because you do being. That's why I love being a fly on the wall in a lot of places because those you see everything.
yep. And it's the CEO or owner's job to get out of their story. Look, the biggest strength of any owner of any company, of a product, of a service, whatever it is, we all have a story. You have one, David. I have one
Sure.
about my company and where it's working, where it's not working. But it's just a story. We don't see everything. And sometimes, actually, our story, our need to be right about it, gets in the way of seeing reality,
Yep.
and describing current reality, that goes back to Jesus Christ. It goes back to Lao Tzu and Confucius. It goes back to Norman Vincent Peale or Napoleon Hill, to Tony Robbins in the present day. If you are caught up in your story,
Yep.
you can't see reality, and your team judges you for that. It's unfortunate,
Mm.
it's cruel, it's mean-spirited, whatever it is. And it's the greatest gift you can receive is to see reality. And your team can be set up to do that. I mean, and when we do a 3, 4, 5 day program, one of the things you see over time is the energy in the room goes up and the level of honesty goes up.
Hmm.
And you start seeing people on a break go over to someone else, and I have eavesdropped. I admit it. I did it. I've eavesdropped on those conversations where somebody says, Susie says to Herman, Herman, you consistently downplay the contributions of women in this company. You got
Mm.
to stop that. You got to become aware of some of the, and Herman would say, oh, I don't mean to do that. Can you give me an example? And Susie says, yes, here's one. Or, uh, you disrespected me in a meeting years ago, Fred, and I'm speaking as a guy,
Yeah.
and I've stuffed it. I didn't say anything to you. It bothers me every time I see you.
Mm.
I'm angry
Yep.
with you. And we have heard thousands and thousands of those conversations taking place on breaks or right in front of the group. And we do actual exercises where people tell the truth to each other, the real truth, the authentic, their truth. And that if we were doing a seminar on leadership, I can tell you what it's built around. It's first, it is built around relationships. Because if you're going to lead people, you can only do it if you have a good relationship with them. Well, that begs the question, how do you create better relationships? And that word is trust.
Yep.
You don't have a good relationship unless you have trust, right? Well, what's the way you build trust? And one of the ways, which we emphasize, is that you build trust by working together toward meaningful goals.
Mm.
If you think about your closest buddies in a company, it's somebody you took on the monster, you took on the competition, you took on a problem and solved it. You know, uh, I have a bunch of kids, but I've kind of raised two of the three daughters of my sister, my nieces.
Hmm.
Unfortunately, my sister is an alcoholic and she's never been able to handle it. I've paid for rehab 5 times and it hasn't worked.
No, I
But
know. I was a recovery coach. Among the
um,
things I've done along the line. So I know, when you're in substance disease, no matter what that substance is, it's very hard to overcome. And no matter how much money you throw at it, isn't always the answer. I wish that was the case for many people.
well, I've done my best, but
Yep.
it hasn't
100.
worked. But in the meantime, two of her three children, I've kind of raised them also. And one of them married a guy who was an immigrant from Turkey, and he was a misogynist to the nth degree. He was also had a doctorate in physics.
Mm.
This guy was so smart that he was in charge of the team creating the next diesel engine for Cummins
Wow.
diesel, the biggest
Yeah,
manufacturer, I
yeah,
think, of diesel engines in the world. And he ran research
great.
into meeting these environmental standards as they increased. They had to have a team, meeting those
Right.
laws. This guy's super smart and a misogynist, totally. And uh, as an uncle, I kind of worked with her to get that she wasn't going to change him,
Right.
and they divorced. And that niece, by the way, is remarrying in August. I'm going to the wedding
Congratulations.
to a wonderful man. She's been single for 15 years, and she's lovely and wonderful and independent. And she's marrying an ex-Navy SEAL, by the way.
Okay. Great.
Uh, he's in his mid 50s and way more fit than me, way more handsome than me, and a wonderful guy, wonderful man. But you know, these things that people know about people and don't say them and stuff them, and it's like bad food sitting in your stomach.
Yep.
You need to throw up in a responsible way. You need to eliminate that bad memory, that bad feeling. And so much of that happens in organizations. So that would be like one little thing that happens in a group setting with a skilled facilitator
Yep.
so that, no fist fights break out.
Right. And as skilled facilitator, especially that you're there to help create the culture, improve the culture, you got to listen to all those things. You got to be the fly on the wall to listen to some things. So,
Anyway, that's
yep.
what I do, what I love to do. I've got a zillion stories. The most recent one is we do a lot of stories about I'm right, you're wrong. That
Yep.
right?
Yeah.
The
How much
moment,
do we push that through, right?
you know,
I have to be more right than you're wrong. And
and if you say something that in a righteous way, that automatically triggers in the other person, I must be wrong, and that doesn't feel good. So then you play I'm right. Well, one of the ways that we do little experiential exercise on that is uh, with what do they call it? Arm wrestling,
okay.
you know,
Yep.
and teach them a different outcome to I'm right. Anyway, we didn't do that in one seminar, a corporate seminar recently with a medium-sized company and a great group. I wasn't there. Our trainer, and we have these trainer meetings now on Zoom, which is great. And then the trainer meeting, he shared this story. He ended up uh, at a time when we had taken all the chairs and tables out of the room to do a stand-up exercise. This issue came up. And the trainer and the guy had the guy lay down on his stomach, and the trainer laid down on his stomach on the carpet, and they did arm wrestling, you know, to make that, with the change in the language
Hmm.
from I'm right, I'm right,
Right.
I'm right, I'm right. And by the way, when you do that exercise with a large group, they are so excited and happy.
Yep.
We love to be right, you know. And then we have them experience how empty the feeling is and how fast it goes away.
Mm.
and then we do I'm right, and the
Right.
other person gently goes, I understand your point of view. Here's
Mm.
mine.
Yep.
You know, so that's the exercise. But the idea is that a trainer stays awake to what's happening in the room, to those pen taps, to the I call it the teenage eye roll
Yep.
with a 40-year-old man, does that, up to the left thing,
Hmm.
and so you learn to see the signals when truth is not present in the room. You may do something about it at that time. You may just catalog it and say, there'll be a moment where I can deal with that. But that's what good experiential trainers do, is they become expert at noticing. And I've got some people, that have worked for me in more than one company who are just brilliant at doing that. And I'm pretty good, frankly.
Yeah, no, it sounds like it. You've created and led companies and been with some of the bigger companies of the world, right? I mean, that's really what you've done, and that's the legacy that you leave is the impact that you've had over 1 million clients. People that you've trained. Now, as we're getting closer to the end of the episode, I always have somebody come into the magic garden to plant one more seed, one more piece of advice or guidance that you might have for us today.
Look, I think, and I'll use teenagers as an example. I think they have a lot tougher time today than you and I had.
Sure.
I mean, they have more materially and more opportunity in many ways, but they're facing chaos in a way that we know that's a chaotic environment in business, in families, in
Hmm.
institutions, in companies. Chaos reigns right now. Teenagers have a particularly rough time of it. And to handle chaos, and just my tip of the day is wake up, pay attention to an increased level of awareness. I'm my joke that's not a joke is that I've been very good at getting married and very bad at staying married. One of my former wives has a wisdom that I've never understood, but I really get it. She's got knowledge that comes from some mysterious place. She doesn't use the word awareness. She talks about a higher state of noticing. And that's how I'm going to language this tip is wake up. Develop a higher state of noticing in yourself. What is it that's reoccurring to you? What is it that's keeping you awake at night or waking you up in the morning that triggers you when you see it or feel it or hear it? Notice those strong emotions. There's always a lesson in them. When you're angry, there's a lesson there. When you're sad, there's a lesson there.
Sure.
Feel it. Don't stuff it. When you're joyful, notice it. Celebrate it. Do more of it.
Mm-hmm.
When you're afraid, notice it. And then notice the people around you in a different way, in a deeper way. What's going on for them? What would bring more meaning to their lives? And then finally, notice your environment and spend more time out in it. I'll be going for a walk today along the creek in Golden, Colorado with a couple of friends. It's a lovely walk, and I love the sound of rushing water. I don't know about you, but it's
Me too. That's why, I'm not I like the beach. I used to, I grew up in Brooklyn, so it's right near the beaches. But I'm not a beach person. I'm definitely a mountain person. Give me, running brooks and mountain stuff, man. I love that. That's where I aspire to kind of finish my days.
well, spend more time in nature is my advice
Yep.
to CEOs. I have a very close friend who swims 6 days out of 7,
Mm.
and that's his place to be quiet.
Yep.
While living in Japan, the most crowded place on the planet, I got into scuba diving because you're alone down there. I mean,
Sure.
you've got a buddy for safety reasons, but you're very alone, you and the fish and the coral. Uh, and I walked in the Japan Alps because,
Mm.
they're a little hard to get to, and then not that many people hike there. So you can be alone in a beautiful setting. It's one of the reasons I ended up in Colorado is my experience in the Japan Alps. Look, find a place to be alone with yourself.
Yep.
It can be in prayer, it can be in meditation, it can be swimming or walking, running. I was recently interviewed by a patent attorney, intellectual property attorney,
Yep.
who runs. And the guy's incredibly disciplined, and he runs in these masters programs, for
Hmm.
old guys who can, at a fast walk, they're better than my run. You
Yeah.
know, so find some place, ideally every day, to be with yourself
You
and
have
notice
to.
first yourself, be honest with yourself, and then others. Then start noticing other people in a deeper, more meaningful way and sort for meaning. And then get outside, wake up.
100%. I agree with you 100% on all of those things. Now, I know I'm going to put in the show notes, and I know you have your extraordinarypeople.com. Is that the best place to contact you?
It is. And uh, particularly if you sign up for that free 28 page
Yep.
PDF and sign up, you're automatically signing up for my e-zine. If you hit reply to the e-zine, every one of those goes to me. And my phone number is on some of those communications, so you can reach. I'm easy to reach. And if it's just for a quick talk or a problem you want to talk about for a few minutes, I'm easily available. Look, it is in fact all about relationships. We work with people that we know, like, and trust. I attempt every day to earn that, knowing that, liking and trusting, and who knows where it leads. Maybe with most people, it doesn't lead to business. It leads to exchanging ideas about professional basketball or walks in nature, or about family.
Well, but
But
right, there's so much value. It doesn't always have to lead to business, but being a better human being, as you said, you would take the walks, finding about meditation. You and I spoke about it in the green room, and a little bit here is, where we both wouldn't have thought of any of that before, but how that now you're telling us to take a walk and having that impact in your personal life also definitely translates into your business life.
and great learning.
Yep.
You know, like I don't attend church regularly. I am a dedicated Christian, and I attempt to have the Christian belief structure show up in my personal and business life. But I found that there's a whole community of people like me that don't go to church, don't go to synagogue, or don't go to mosque, don't go to temple, and yet they run their entire life based on the principles of their faith.
Yep.
And I've learned so much from that. I found, like, for the first time in my life, I felt like I found my tribe. It's,
Yeah, no, and that's I think that's what happens. That's why I talk about it. That's why this podcast is for that try to get people to find it earlier in life, right? I wish I would have learned or been part of or comfortable enough to do this when I was younger, but I'm still going to appreciate it and do the things now to make me uh, thrive.
I know, to be a better man, you
Yep,
know.
100%. Be the man I thought I was all those years, and now I really feel that I'm the person who I need to be.
Well, something that shows up in a lot of my writing is um, to live the life you were born to live.
Yep.
And that's never ending. I want to keep learning, and one of the ways to do that is relationships that normally I wouldn't have created even 10 years ago. So get into
Okay.
relationship. I'm available.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for all of the knowledge that you gave us and your time. I really appreciate that.
David, I love what you're doing, and which is why I'm here, and I've enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you. And for everybody else, as always, I want you to have a foundation of peace and love in your life, walking outside or anything else. But when you bring a bat, remember, hit your sweet spot, but make sure that bat is about being awesome, being authentic, and also just keep going as best as you can. Thank you so much.